In many ancient cultures and religious traditions, rulers and elite members of society not only had wives, they also had concubines. Under Roman law, concubinage was tolerated as the relationship was durable and exclusive. Roman marriages were extremely different from what we conceive of them as today. It was ordinary and even expected for husbands to cheat on their spouses back then, and marriages were more transactional than they are today. Roman women were totally dependent on their men. Roman wives at least had some degree of legal standing, but a concubine was usually a slave or freedwoman whose pleasures were enjoyed by a single or married Roman man. As Roman sexual mores were the epitome of what we would now call a double standard, a Roman wife who had an extramarital affair could expect to be divorced, unless her husband were somehow dependent upon her. It was a political marriage allying him with the wife's more powerful family. But a Roman man could have any dalliance with anybody, as long as it wasn't the wife of another Roman citizen. Female slave of the Romans were expected to warmly receive the sexual attentions of their owners. This was judged by the Romans as a slave's lot in life. Male slaves were also subject to the sexual whims of their owners. Concubines generally had no legal standing and could expect no inheritance from their masters. However, many masters did grant them some degree of inheritance or manumission upon their death. Welcome to History Rediscovered. To support, please subscribe. In this episode, we discuss the diabolical life of ancient Roman male concubines. The power dynamics involved in the act of intimacy itself were more important to the Romans than who was having sex. They believed that because the woman was the receiver in heterosexual relationships, the guy was in a position of authority because he was the giver. Roman sexuality in the past. The ancient Romans did not perceive intimacy or sexuality in the same way that we do. They didn't consider someone to be heterosexual or homosexual. A partnership between two men, the relationship between an adult man, known as the aristes, and a teenage boy, known as the arominus, was called paiderasty. This wasn't just an intimate partnership, it was also a form of mentorship. One of the men had to be the receiver and adopt a more feminine and submissive role. Someone of this age would not have been seen as a problem by them. In a time before contraception, it was quite usual for men in positions of authority to have both male and female partners, and neither was regarded as cheating in the way that we do now. Being in a relationship gap was even considered to be a type of rite of passage for upper-class people. As an illustration, the youngster was able to establish relationships with people other than his fathers and was properly introduced to the senatorial class. It served as a kind of birth control for men to have intimate encounters with people other than their wives, or at the very least, it allowed them to enjoy themselves without putting their wives in risk. This wasn't always the case, though, and the Roman populace found it puzzling when they opted to play the subservient and what they perceived as feminine role. The emperor or whoever held a higher rank would have been expected to assume the giver's role in homosexual partnerships because it was thought to be the more powerful and manly one. Even though Julius Caesar was the most powerful man on earth, he preferred to be the recipient in relationships with men. This was the most perplexing concept for Roman citizens to consider. He was the one who made Rome into an empire and had the most authority there, so it makes sense that he would want to have control in the bedroom as well. Julius Caesar had a reputation as being willing to sleep with anyone. Julius Caesar's appetite was said to be voracious. He was rumored to not be particularly choosy about partners, hence the rumors of him and King Nicomedes as well as the numerous women he was said to be involved with. According to Suetonius, Curio referred to Caesar as every woman's man and every man's woman. It was meant to be an insult, though adultery wasn't frowned upon. The fact that Caesar participated in relationships with men in his fashion was. Caesar's rumored relationship with King Nicomedes of Bithynia was not suspect because it was a relationship between two men, but because of the role that Caesar was said to play in it. Rome was a patriarchy, meaning that men were considered socially superior to women, and, as such, traits normally ascribed to women were considered lesser. As a result, to be penetrated was to fall into a feminine role. The rumor held that Caesar was the penetrated partner in his relationship with Nicomedes, and he became the subject of ridicule for it. According to Roman gossip writer Suetonius, The Gauls were said to sing, "Caesar may have conquered the Gauls, but Nicomedes conquered Caesar," referring to Caesar's passive sexual role. The intent of such an insult was to paint Caesar as less manly, and therefore less confident and powerful, two important characteristics in a leader, regardless of whether or not the relationship really occurred. Emperor Hadrian. Although it appears that Hadrian was not at all interested in women while he was married to a woman for political reasons, he did not solely have male lovers. In fact, according to the majority of historians, the couple never ever officially married. The fact that the emperor had so many lovers is one of the reasons historians think the attention that Hadrian paid to his male partners was huge. Although common for the Roman emperors to have male lovers, Hadrian was unique in making it clear he was gay. Hadrian, ruled 117 to 138 AD, married Vibia Sabina in 100 AD for political reasons. After all, Sabina was a niece of Roman Emperor Trajan. As it was common among the imperial family, the relationship was incestuous. Hadrian and Sabina were second cousins once removed, but there was no inbreeding. Hadrian never consummated the marriage and the couple didn't have any children. Hadrian was much more interested in his male lovers. No wonder that his wife poor Sabina looked for solace in the arms of other men. No evidence points towards Hadrian being attracted to women. A well-known love story between Hadrian and Antinous is a strong proof of Hadrian's love for young men. While Hadrian had many lovers throughout his life, Antonius, a beautiful teenager, stood out above the others. After seeing to the boy's education and extensive travels, tragedy struck when the two were traveling in Egypt and the boy drowned in the Nile under mysterious circumstances. At the site of the death, Hadrian founded a city and named it in honor of Antonius. Emperors often discovered their lovers among the palace slaves and continued to treat them as slaves, so it was a bit of an anomaly how he handled his lovers in general. Nero was no exception to this, and he discovered at least two of his male lovers and his slaves. Unlike other emperors, however, Nero forced the men to participate in strange wedding ceremonies. In this particular instance, Pythagoras was the groom and Nero was the shining veil. Of course, this was one of the instances where the general populace was perplexed by the emperor's behavior. After all, he was the ruler and the one in charge, so he should have been the dominant. To ensure that the populace understood that Nero was assuming the role of a strong man, he had the youngster castrated. However, his actions here are far worse sounding to our modern sensibilities. Nero also showed violence to his concubines and lovers in other cases. A few years later, he wed Spores, another slave boy. This time, Nero satisfied his people's expectations of masculinity by acting in that capacity. He had a favored freedman, Spurus, castrated, then married him in a ceremony in which Spurus was dressed in the traditional garb of a bride and Nero played the groom. Later, Nero repeated the ceremony with another of his freedmen playing the groom while he adopted the role of bride, sans castration. The pseudo-nuptials were consummated on a couch in full view of guests at a banquet. Tiberius, alleged depravities. The Emperor Tiberius, only the second Roman emperor, and the first to succeed to the position, is often seen today as a solid, if unwilling, politician and leader, who did a reasonably good job in his reign while nevertheless falling short of the standards set by Augustus, his predecessor and stepfather, Levick 1999. He is also seen as a flawed individual who, according to several ancient sources, was prone to alcoholic and sexual excesses. This behavior had seemingly been present throughout his life, including during his younger years as a military commander, but grew more prominent in his older years, particularly the later portion of his reign. His last years of reign have gone down in history, which he spent in isolation on the island of Capri. There, according to Suetonius, he was supposed to organize really perverse games. In the villa on Capri, the emperor had a large harem of young boys and girls, in whose company he indulged in the pleasures of the body. Tiberius spent a lot of time in private villas on Mediterranean islands. He brought young boys to the islands to serve as his household servants and to satiate his sexual needs. However, Tiberius would demand more than just from his young concubines. He would make them do some disgusting things as well. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe.